Good morning, everybody. It's Laura with Yes MLS, and this is the listing input class. If you are looking to get listing input permissions added to your profile, this is part of it. And then your broker or manager needs to send over permission for you to have that as well. So let me just show you a couple things here. All right, get you to see my screen. All right, you should all see my screen. It's the homepage of Matrix. And a couple things you need to know. If you want your broker to send over permissions, they can either send it in an email, but it's really actually easier for them to send it in the form. So all of our forms, many of our forms are under the links menu here, and that is across the top of Matrix. And if we scroll down, there's a section in here that's got MLS links, and one of those is the listing input authorization form. So they can certainly just fill that out. Excuse me, and send that in. It goes to membership at yes-MLS. So with those two things, with those two things in place, Lori will add listing input to your permissions. If you want, you can enter your name and your license number in that chat section that shows your attendance, and that'll help you get that listing input permission. I would first like to go over some rules and regulations, and then we'll dive into entering a listing. If you go to your name in Matrix, so your name in the upper right corner of your system, and you click the help option here, so your name and help, all of our manuals are in here, and the one we're going over today is the listing input manual. So if you need that and want to print it, it's here under, again, it's your name and help, and then training manuals, yes, MLS training manuals, and it's the listing input book. So everything I go over today will be in this book. This webinar is being recorded, and again, under your name and help, we've got all of our recorded webinars, so those are available. And throughout this class, if you have any questions, please include those in the chat, and I will try to keep up with those. And if I don't get them all, please on the site, stick on the webinar at the end, and we'll try to get those covered. All right, so with Yes MLS, we cover about the eastern third of Ohio and a little bit of West Virginia. So there's a nice little map, and just show you that our counties are in red here. So these are all the areas that we cover. So as a member of Yes MLS, you are required to put in listings that are in our counties. And that does apply to certain property types. So now that you know our territories, we say that there is a 48-hour rule, and that you have to enter listings that are in residential, multifamily, or land property types within 2 business days of taking that listing. So you have a listing agreement, it's got a listing date, or if there's no date, then we look at the last signature date. If there are both of those things on your listing agreement, we're going to look at the last of the two, the latter of the two. So if it's signed today and the listing date is in the future, then we'll look at that listing date as the date that the contract starts. If the listing date is today and you didn't get everybody, all the signatures until Monday, then Monday's your listing date. So please make sure that you watch your clock and you get those listings entered in time. Now, there's something called clear cooperation, and hopefully you have heard of that in your office or seen it in our postings. But clear cooperation is a NAR policy, and NAR says that if you advertise your listing, if you advertise your listing, regardless of what your MLS says, you have 1 day to get that entered into your MLS. So keep in mind, we don't count weekends and we don't count holidays, and NAR doesn't either. But what NAR says is if you take a listing today and you publicly market it and you put a sign in the yard or any other type of marketing, social media, flyers, emails, things like that, ignore your MLS rule. You have to get that listing entered by tomorrow, not 2 business days. So please make sure that you pay attention to that. There's a very hefty fine. It's $1,000 if you don't get that listing in within 1 day of advertising. And we have had those occasions. So please watch that. Rex, you said you have a listing that's zoned both commercial and residential. Yes, that is, if you have a scenario where your listing is zoned in multiple ways, and that can be proven by auditor data, building department, zoning commission. So it's documented. It's not just somebody saying, oh yeah, it's a zone both ways. Then you can enter in both manners. The primary list zoning type has to be entered within 2 business days. And if it's both of those, commercial and residential, get that residential one in within the 2 business days. The commercial can wait because, again, that's not a required property type anyway. But once you enter those, then they all have to follow the 48-hour rule of any changes. And when that listing sells, you need to mark the way it's sold as sold. So if it's sold as a residential property type, then you mark the listing sold in residential and you withdraw with release the other property type, so the commercial. I don't think you do need 2 separate listings unless the terms are different, but they probably shouldn't be. Although a listing agreement, I think it states this residential property, so you might want to look into that. Perhaps check with your broker. Okay, so listing entry and any changes, status changes, price changes, extensions, all of those have to be made within 2 business days. Please watch your clock. We don't count weekends and don't count holidays. And Carol, Carol, I have somebody who's having trouble with sound. All right, so when you take those listings and you get them in within those 2 business days, then you have 2 business days to get your primary photo in. So we say the primary photo has to be the front of the house, street view. So if it's a high-rise building, you stand at the street and take a picture of the building. It's not the front door. If it's a home, you stand at, in the front yard, in the driveway, in the street, and take a photo of that property. It cannot be just the front door. It should not be a drone photo. It's a street level view of your property. That needs to be entered within 48 hours. And that piece applies to residential and multifamily. Vacant land there's no requirement for picture, nor is there for commercial or rental. Keep in mind that photos are copyrighted to the person taking the photos. So you should not be using someone else's photo on your listing. If you pick up a listing that someone else had listed, take your own photos. They have the right to ask you to take them down. We will intervene a little bit as well with those. So please don't use someone else's unless you get that in writing. Your seller does have the option to opt out of your photos. We'll talk about that in a moment. All right, so exceptions to the 48-hour rule. If you have somebody who's from out of town or just is late in getting you the signed listing agreement back, you cannot put a listing in until you get a listing agreement in hand. So hold on to anything that can prove that it's late, such as a postmarked envelope or a dot loop signature page, email, fax sheet that has the date stamp on it. Get that listing in as quickly as you can. You will be asked to send over paperwork showing why it's late. So really the bottom line there is we don't want you to hold listings back. The goal is, as a member of the MLS, to get those listings in for all members to have equal opportunity and fair opportunity, excuse me, to see that information and share it with their customers. So we're not looking to punish you or anything. We just want that data to be entered in a timely manner and available to all the members. Your seller is allowed certainly to opt out of the MLS. We call those office exclusive, and they sign a form. That form again is under links. I want to keep going to input. It's under links, and we have it here. Office exclusive, opt out of MLS. And when they sign that, there's several boxes that they have to initial. And I would recommend that you go over that very clearly with your customer so they understand what they're doing. And it really is for your seller to say, hey, I don't want it in the MLS, not for you to promote that to say, oh, you don't need to put it in. But it is an option, and your sellers do have that option to say, oh, that page isn't going to load. Sorry. But your seller has that option to say that. A couple things. You need to send over that opt-out form and your listing agreement to the MLS within 2 business days. It's the same as entering. You're just not putting it in. You're sending it to us. We log that into a separate database. So should anyone ask us about it, we have record of it and tell them to call the listing office or agent. And if your seller opts out and signs that office exclusive, they are doing so for the life of that listing agreement. So you cannot decide partway through with that listing agreement to say, okay, yeah, let's just go ahead and enter it. They're opting out for the life of the listing agreement if they choose to do that. If they do change their mind, they will need to sign a withdraw with release for that first listing agreement, and then you'll have to get more paperwork signed with new terms in order to enter that into the MLS. In links as well, there is the opt-out for the photo. So there is oh, I'm not seeing it very quickly. There's an, oh, here it is, photo opt-out form. They need to sign that as well, stating they don't want a photo. And then you do need to upload the seller opt-out image that we have available for you here. So please make sure that if your seller does not want a photo, they sign the form and you upload an image that we provide. Couple other just housekeeping items that you should be aware of. Temporarily off the market is a status that you can place your listing in. Your seller needs to give you permission to do that. When you take a listing temporarily off the market, it's because your seller doesn't want showings for a period of time, or maybe through the end of that listing agreement. So if there's, if you have a property that is unable to be shown, then you should get your seller to sign documentation that says they want it temporarily off the market. They need to give you an expected back on the market date, and you will enter that as BOM with the month, day, and year in your broker remarks. So you do have to tell everyone when you expect it to go back on the market. That can certainly change and isn't a problem. You just need more documentation. With temporarily off the market, you should not be marketing those. You should not be showing those. And that includes showings, open houses, promotion through newspapers, websites, things like that. So temp off market means just that, temp off market. If we find that you are marketing those, it's a $500 penalty, and we certainly don't want to get you one of those. So what we don't want to see is a listing in the system that says no showings until a future date. If it's in the system and active, it should be shown. So if it can't be shown, you take it temp off market with seller signature. And with that, you don't have any showings and you don't market that. All right, next is coming soon. So that's a status that has shown, it just gives people a lot of confusion. So coming soon is simply a status that you have in the MLS. When you take a listing, you have a listing agreement. The only way you can enter listings in our system is if you have a listing agreement in place. If your seller wants to list with you, but is not ready to show the property, maybe they're cleaning it up or making repairs, or they just want to promote it a little bit before they open the doors, That's fine if you take that listing and you have that listing agreement in place, you can enter it with a status of coming soon. And that status allows people to market it. So that's what's different between coming soon and temp off market, is you can market it. You can share it on public facing websites. You can promote it on social media. You can put that sign in the yard that says coming soon. You just cannot have any showings. So with coming soon, again, you have a listing agreement, and that's where people really get mixed up, is they want to put it in today and their listing agreement starts in the future. Doesn't work that way. Listing agreement is today. You enter it in the system as the coming soon status. You can do that. You can have it in coming soon for up to 14 days. A rule was made earlier this year that said, if you take a coming soon listing, you are not allowed to make that move to active sooner than the original date signed on the coming soon document. So if your seller says, I want it coming soon, we might be ready in 7 days, we might be ready in 14 days. Make it coming soon for 7 days. And if they need to push it later, they can, up to 14 days. But if they need to make it go active earlier, they cannot, and they will need to wait until that coming soon date that they originally signed. With coming soon, there's a form. Again, I'm under links in Matrix, and there's a form here called coming soon, and your seller has to sign that and tell us when they want it active. So remember, your listing agreement's in place today. This date is going to be up to 14 days later. And it tells you right here, you cannot move that to an earlier date. When they sign this, they are also stating that they are not going to show it, and neither are you. You're signing the bottom of this as well. Do not show coming soon listings. We've had this happen too. If we find out that you're showing it, that's a very serious fine, $1,000, and that cannot be waived. So if you take coming soon, watch your dates, make sure you explain that to your seller. It can't go sooner. And when it don't have any showings, and tell them, don't let anybody in. You're the one that's going to be responsible for that, but they also signed it saying they wouldn't do it. When you enter that into the MLS, you need to fill in every required field as you normally would. You need to add a primary photo within those 2 business days. And then that becomes available for other members to see and share with their customers. You also then send this form and the listing agreement back to us. We have those go to coming soon at yes-MLS within 2 business days of the list date. So please get that in a timely manner. And just a couple real quick remarks on photos. So I mentioned that you have to get your primary photo in within 2 days of entering it. So you have 2 days to get the listing in, and then 2 more business days to get the photo in, primary photo. That's the only requirement. You can put up to 35 pictures in. You should not have any for sale signs in that photo. It can be opted out. And again, I showed you where that form was and what you need to do. You should not be virtually staging those pictures unless you remark on the photo that it's virtually staged, and you cannot add anything that isn't there. You cannot put in a fireplace if it doesn't have a fireplace. Joyce is asking, what date is the list date, is the start date for that listing agreement? It's the list date. So when you enter that, the list date is what's on your contract. So if it's a listing dated today, December 9th, that's going to be coming soon until December 18th, then the list date is December 9th and the expected active date is December 18th. Market time does not start until it moves to active status. So market time does not accrue during the coming soon status. Again, I'll say that photos are copyrighted to the seller or to the photographer. So if you take them, they're yours. If the owner takes them, they're theirs. If the owner takes them and somebody else picks up the listing down the road, the seller can certainly give those photos to that new agent. So please just make sure that you only use your own photos. Or if the seller gives them or a professional photographer gives them to you, they are copyrighted to those people and they can share them with whomever they'd like. And then we've had this come up quite often. So I'll just make this general remark, and it's a conversation to have with your buyers or sellers and the list agent and the buyer's agent as you're moving through the process. Listings are memorialized in the system once they go in an off-market status. So basically, we don't make any changes unless it's an error on a listing, an error such as list agent or price or selling agent. But if a listing moves to an off-market status, and that includes things like sold, withdrawn, expired, you are not allowed to then go in later, and we won't either, to go in and remove pictures. So if you have a seller or a buyer that says, you know what, I don't want those photos out there, that's fine. You can go in and either, if you're the list agent, take them down, all but the primary, or ask that the listing agent take those off of the listing for you, but you have to do it before it goes into the sold status or off-market status. However, keep in mind, we are a private organization and only members can see data in our system. And it's really very helpful for people like appraisers and you doing comps to see what those pictures look like previously. It's the public-facing websites that your customers have the issue with, and taking them off the MLS doesn't necessarily take them down from those public-facing sites. You do have options to reach out to Zillow and Realtor.com and the many other sites that your listing goes to get those removed. But taking them off the MLS before it gets to a sold status doesn't necessarily take them off of those sites. So when you have that customer that's a little concerned about those photos being out there, that is a very hard process, and taking them out of the MLS can help, but it doesn't always solve the issue at hand. All right. Some quality assurance information that you need to know. So we have a department that audits and reviews listings. They randomly audit every 150th listing now, and they will ask you to send over paperwork to make sure that just things like dates and data is correct. We're not picking on you. We're not picking on your office. If you get to be the person that gets audited, you're just lucky. And we ask that you send over that paperwork within 2 business days. We also have some spot checks. We also run our own spot checks looking for fields that get commonly missed. If you should get a listing data checker email, it's asking you to correct a field. Please just correct it. If there's a question, call us. Listing data checker also sends you a reminder that your listing's about to expire. That's just a courtesy. So that's not you didn't do anything wrong there. That's just helping you. So the bottom line with all this is that we just want to keep our data fair, clean, accurate for everybody. So we're doing that as not to just try to make money on penalties, because we don't. It's not to punish anybody. It's just to have good, clean, accurate data. However, we do have penalties, because if we didn't have any kind of consequences, no one would pay attention to us. So we have automatic penalties and one warning penalties. Basically, automatic penalties are for late entries and late changes. That's $100, and those just happen. If you enter something late and we catch you, there's nothing you can do. You can't go back in time. So please just make sure that you get those entered in a timely manner. And let's see, the one warning penalty will ask you to send us something, and then we'll go ahead and send you, or we'll call you and ask you to make the correction that we sent to you. And if you still don't do it, there's a penalty that will be incurred. You do have the right to appeal any penalty. You can send a letter to the board of directors. You have to do that within 20 days of getting your penalty, and then they review it at their next meeting. If they decide it gets overturned, that's wonderful. You don't have to pay anything. You just go on your merry way. However, if they say that the penalty is upheld, you will have to pay that. You have no other recourse at that point. So that's one option. The other option is you can take our rules and regulations class. That can be done online or in person. And if you take it online, there's a short quiz that shows that you watch the video. If you come in person, there's no quiz, but you do sign in and register. And that then waives that one penalty per year. That does get reset in January. So we're towards the end of December, we're in December. And that will, if you took one this year already, that'll be reset in January. There are a couple of penalties that can't be waived. Those include sharing your ID and password. Please don't do that. There are ways to have a support or a personal assistant impersonate you. If you work on a team, you can share identities with your teammates. Call us, we'll help you get through that. Entering listings in the incorrect list type, abusing the penalty notification process, and marketing those temp off market listings, as well as the clear cooperation. Those are penalties that cannot be waived, and those will have to be paid. A few more housekeeping pieces, and then we'll get into entering the listing online. Comp only. You have the option, if you bring a buyer to a property and they purchased that property that was not listed, there was not a listing agreement in place when that property was sold, you can enter that as a comp only listing. So that is very nice for you to keep credit, you know, to get the credit for those, and for your office to get the market share for that. So with those comp onlys, you, first and foremost, there is no listing agreement. And we get a couple people calling saying, hey, I had an office exclusive and didn't put it in the MLS. Can I still put that in as a comp only? No, you sold that on your own. You did not use the MLS to facilitate that, and you chose not to because you had it listed. That cannot be a comp only. You have 14 days from recording date to enter a comp only for no fee. If it's beyond 14 days, then there's a $50 fee that must be paid. But it's just like sold. I don't think I mentioned it, but when you go to close a listing, you have 14 days, not 48 hours. 14 days, calendar days, to get that listing entered as sold, and that's 14 days from the recording date. There's a whole host of comp only instructions. Again, I'm under the links menu here, and it's comp only instructions, so print that out if you have it. So comp only, again, is if you brought the buyer to a property that was not listed. Maybe you brought the buyer to a for sale by owner or a new construction that wasn't listed. And you want to have that in the MLS as a comp, so you get the credit, your company does, and others can use that as a comp out there in the field, then you can enter those. But again, I can't stress enough that there is no listing agreement in place for a comp only. When you have those comp onlys and enter them, you then are required to send us the purchase agreement or agency disclosure, the listing itself, and we will mark the listing agent as a non-member, and you remain the selling agent. Okay, the next item that you need to be aware of is something called sold before processing. This is rather common now because the market is so crazy and there's such low inventory. There is a scenario where you might take a listing today. So today is Wednesday. That has to be entered by Friday if you don't advertise it. Someone heard about it through your office. Perhaps you were talking about it at a meeting saying, hey, I have this listing coming up. They came in and you showed it, you got an offer written and accepted, and that sold before you had a chance to process it in the MLS. That's allowed, it happens, things get busy. You still have to enter those. You will enter it as active and then turn around and put it under contract rather quickly within those 2 business days. And we will always audit those sold before processing to make sure that you just have all the paperwork in place. So when you have a scenario where things just happen so quickly, make sure you have all your paperwork lines up, and that, for example, your listing agreement is dated before your purchase agreement. That is key. Short sales are scenarios where the owner still owns it, but they're behind on their payments. The bank is willing to take less than what is owed. So the owner signs a listing agreement. You enter it. An offer is written, and that offer is accepted by the owner, but subject to bank approval. Those still need to come out of the active status. Anytime you have a listing agreement, or purchase agreement rather, whether it's a short sale or not. And there's a purchase agreement that is accepted, it must come out of active. Short sales are the ones that give us some fits because it's contingent on bank approval, and you need to market in that manner so that everyone knows walking through the door that they are not first in line, that there's already an offer on it. So when the owner signs that, you have an accepted purchase agreement. However, it's contingent on bank approval and needs to come out of the active status. And contrary to what your seller wants you to do, you still have to move that either into under contract allow or no showings. All right, and finally, cumulative days on market. So we have two fields, days on market and cumulative days on market. Okay, I'll get back to sold before processing again, hold on. Cumulative days on market and days on market. Days count how long that specific listing number has been on the market. Cumulative days tracks how long that address has been on the market. So if I have a listing for 100 days, and then I lose that listing and you pick it up and you turn right around and put that in, your days on market will go to 0, but your cumulative days on market will be 101. So it looks at the address and parcel, and will continue to count those cumulative days on market. The rule is that it has to be off market for more than 45 days in order for CDOM to be reset. So we are in that time now where people tend to take their listings off the market because of holidays and such, and then they're going to relist in the new year. So if you're going to do that, if your seller wants to do that, and the goal is to reset days on market and cumulative days on market, make sure you leave that off for 46 days or longer in order to have those have the benefit of being off and those days reset. So sold, question to go over sold before processing again, where you have a scenario where you have a listing agreement in place. We'll use the weekend. We'll use weekend dates. So you take a listing on a Friday and you don't have a chance to put it in the MLS, but you have an open house on Sunday. That's allowed. We say it's got to be business days, right? It has to be entered within a certain number of business days. So you have that open house on Friday. It's not yet entered into the MLS, and you get an offer written and accepted. That now has a purchase agreement before you had an opportunity to enter that into the MLS. That we call that it's sold before you processed it. And again, it's allowed because you're not breaking any rules at that point. But you still have to enter that into the MLS. So you have until Tuesday to get that entered into the MLS, according to our rules. Well, actually Monday with NAR's clear cooperation, because you advertised it and had an open house. So you put it in on Monday, but you need to turn right around and mark that as under contract. And with those, because that happens so quickly, we will audit it and ask you to send over the listing and purchase agreement to make sure all that lines up. So basically, it's just, we call it sold before processing. It's just when things happen so quickly that you didn't have a chance to enter it, you still have to, and you still need to put it under contract. Your screen didn't, I don't think your screen froze. Now I'm moving it. I'm going to go back to the home page. Everybody see the home page now? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about listing input. You log into the MLS as you normally would, and then you land on this homepage. And a lot of people, when doing listing input or managing their listings, they like to go to this My Listings panel. I'm not a fan of that because it doesn't give you everything you get to do with listings, and you can't start a listing from here. So with listing input, there's an input tab here across the top. And that is how you get into all of your listings, and that is how you can change anything. Let me point out here that we have all of our listing input sheets available, and I just want to pull up the residential one so you can see how this correlates with the input screen. You should all have hopefully seen a listing input sheet where you've got red fields that are required. You've got these blue tabs, these blue headers, and those are going to indicate tabs in our system. So this is just a courtesy. You don't have to fill one of these in, but it's very helpful as you go to enter your listing. You're going to have all the data that you need. It's a 4-page document. So when you go to enter a listing, you've got your listing agreement in place. It's effective now. It's within 2 business days. You haven't advertised it. And you're going to go to the input tab and you're going to add a new listing. So basically you take that listing input sheet and you come to the add new button here and you get started adding your new listing. It is very important on this screen to select the correct property type. If you don't, you're going to have to start all over. There's no way to change it from a multifamily to a residential or any other type. Where you started here is where it stays. So we're going to go ahead and choose residential listing input. And on this screen, you get to see the different options that you have. You can fill it from Realist, and Realist is our tax program. You can copy it from an existing listing. So maybe if you're relisting a property, you can copy it, or you can start with a completely blank listing. If for whatever reason, Realist is not available, you can't use this fill from Realist. You might have to start with a blank. But in general, I think fill from Realist is a really good option. When you choose your county, you can then enter your address, and it doesn't need to have all of these fields filled in. It could be the parcel, it could be the address, it could be the owner. And when you fill that portion in search, you're going to see the owner, the parcel, a little bit of information about that property, and you can choose this fill option. And when you choose fill, it goes out to Realist, grabs the data that it can, and puts it into the listing. On this screen, we've got we've got a lot of words that nobody likes to read. So let me just go over these for you. Incoming is a status that lets you work through these tabs, and you can save it and get back to it later if you save it as incoming. The key thing to remember about incoming is that you have to click submit listing 2 different times in order for that to save. And I'm going to say that many times through this class, because we get a lot of people who just hit submit listing once while in the incoming status, and it does nothing. It doesn't save it. And then they're mad because they don't have that, they don't have the listing to go back in and finish editing. So please make sure when you click a listing in the incoming status to save it, that you click submit listing 2 different times and you see input succeeded. And I'll show you that shortly. You also have coming soon and active. So coming soon, we've talked about that. If you're going to make that a coming soon listing, choose coming soon. If you want it to be live for everybody to see and show, then you choose active. These 2 statuses, coming soon and active, must have all required fields filled in properly in order for it to save. If there are errors, you cannot save it as coming soon or active. Again, coming soon, people see it, they just can't show it. They can make appointments, they can't show it. Active, they see it and they can show it. All right, so basically you use that listing input sheet that we looked at, and we go through the different tabs going across the top. Those blue identifiers that I showed you here, like general info and agent info, that correlates with the tabs going across the top here. So that's just kind of easy for you to navigate based on where you are in the input sheet. Your ID will automatically be populated. If you're a support staff, you'll need to type in the agent's ID. If you have a co-lister, you'll need to type in their license number and hit refresh, and that will pull in their information. So basically, red fields are required, black fields are not required. However, I would encourage you to enter everything that applies to your property. And even if it's a yes, no field and it doesn't apply, say no. People search for lots of different fields, and the more you enter, the better search results, the better your listing will come up in the search results that people ask for. So enter everything. I am certainly not going to talk about every single field, but I will talk about ones that I get a lot of questions on. Limited service. If you are a limited service company, you're saying things like, call the owner for showings. present all offers to the owner. If that's how you operate, that's fine. Just make sure you identify it as a limited service, yes. We talked about comp only. That is a list type that you will enter, or our typical one is exclusive agency. You do have to enter compensation. That is what you're paying the other agent, what the broker rather is paying the other broker. So you must enter not the full commission rate, but what the broker is paying the other broker, and then if anything else applies. So limited service is where it's typically companies that say, I'll put your listing in the MLS, but you have to do everything else. You're going to pay me to put it in the MLS. I'm a licensed agent and I can do that, but I'm not going to take the showing appointment calls. I'm not going to help facilitate the purchase agreement. That's going to be what you have to do. I'm offering limited services to list this property. They still have to follow all our rules in the MLS, but they don't have to be the ones making the appointments or listening to the offers being presented. Your agent typically isn't part of that process if they're limited service. Okay. If you choose a bonus for compensation, that is not explained here. That is explained in your broker remarks. But if you have a graduated commission, then that is explained here. So 3.5% on the first 100,000 to 2.5% on the balance is something you would type. And keep in mind that we have these little question marks, and those little question marks give you some good help information if you are wondering what should be entered in the fields. All right, so moving along, we've got owner name. That did get auto-populated. If you feel strongly enough about it, you could remove that, but it's part of public record and it's part of what goes on the contract. And it's actually a good double check to say, did the person who signed the listing agreement, is that the same person that's on the tax record? The fields that are entered here were the ones that were filled in by the auto-populate. Any of those can be edited. So if something doesn't look quite right, you can change it, but I like that it does the parcel and the address because it puts it in there properly. You then have to fill out things like area. It filters area by your county. So that makes it easy, but it does not filter school district by the county. So if I just start typing the word Huron, it located it. If I don't type very fast and I click in there and I type H and then I type U, it doesn't do it. So you have to type pretty fast. And the subdivision complex may be under the tax record. Typically it's a sign in the front of the development. So, you know, use caution there. That did fill it in from the auditor record, but that's probably not the typical subdivision where people, you know, if it's like Greenbrier Village, you know, it might be something more because that's how the builder set it up in the auditor site. So you might want to change that. So the map, it does not automatically populate. You need to first click Get Lat Longe from address. So when you do that, it's going to go out there and look to see that address and where it should go based on Google, and it plots it on the map. Now, if you aren't sure if that's the right parcel, there it is, the right parcel, you can click on Set Lat Longe and check it and move it if you need to. So step 2 is to click the Set Lat Longe. And if you click on any of these parcels, it's going to tell you who owns it and what the address is. So this one happens to be on the right parcel, but if it weren't, you could pick that up and move it to where it needs to go. So I can just drop that. Now notice this is an interesting shaped lot, little L-shaped lot, and the house is over here. It's probably going to put the parcel, or the pin rather, way back here on the house. That does not help you with Google Street View, and it makes it difficult when they're giving driving directions. You really should pull any pin up to the street view so that it is along the road where that property sits instead of having it back there. So you have the ability, you know, if it's maybe looks like this and your property's in water, that's bad. So you should really either try to type in the address and locate it. And if I do that, it comes and says, I think it's somewhere here. So I can click through these parcels and say, oh, yep, here it is right here in the corner. And I can place a new pin. So you have the option to fix that, especially with vacant land. If you take vacant land listings, I would highly recommend that you double check this and move it to where it's supposed to go. Also, new construction that is not been really plotted well because it's a new street. You should you really should move that pin to where that is. Even if it, like I've seen it where it's in the middle of, like, let's pretend like this is a big piece of property that a builder bought and they haven't even put the road in. Still drop that pin here so that people can find it with driving directions. I know that seems weird, but that is very helpful. And yes, Holly mentioned that there's a real problem with vacant land and new construction. There really is. We try to look at those, but we don't know where they're supposed to go. You as the list agent, you know where that's supposed to go. You need to fix those. Excuse me. All right, so once you get it plotted in the right spot, there's this feature called Google Street View. So you've probably all done that, clicked on it on a listing to go, oh, look, okay, there's no picture in the house yet, in the listing rather, yet, but I can see what that house is by going to Google Street View. You as the list agent have control over Google Street View, but only in the MLS. You can't change Google. And this is a perfect example. This property, the way it plotted was, excuse me. This is horrible. There's no house in sight. The house actually happens to be over here to the right. So you as the listing agent can come into this Google Street View, click and drag and spin and walk down the road and get that Google Street View in a better starting location so that anybody who receives this will see this location versus the Google. Now, this is not any better. It's a bunch of construction vehicles. So you can also zoom out a little bit. I can take my mouse, it turns into a circle here and come over to the other street and click, and then I can spin and I can zoom and tilt until I get that to a much better starting position than the original one that was just looking down a road. So first impressions are important, right? So you want to make sure that it looks good, and that's a really quick, easy way to do that. All right, so once you're finished with that, you click OK. That stores it until you hit submit, and then that makes it part of this listing. We mentioned about sellers opting out of the photo. There's the option here. You have to say, yes, they opted out. And yes, you have the form signed. And yes, you're going to upload the seller opt-out image. So that's only if the seller decides not to have a photo of their property. And I get it. If a governor or a mayor or a sports figure wants to move and they don't want everybody seeing that house and knowing that they're moving quite yet, you can certainly opt out. All right, so list date, that's what's on your contract, whether it's the later of the two, the latter of the two, list date written on your contract or signature date by the last person signing, or if you don't have list date, it's the last signature date. Expiration date is written, list price, expected active date. Notice here it says this is only used with coming soon. Please do not enter that if you just have a regular listing that's going active. That date is only to be used if you have selected the coming soon status. Online bidding, these fields apply to online bidding. You can either have online bid or an auction. You really shouldn't be having both. Auction is when you have a live auctioneer. Online bid are sites like Hubzu and auctions.com, where it's all being processed through the online process. If you have questions on that, call our quality assurance department. Those can be a little confusing. Notice some of these are not required. I really think it's helpful, especially something like financing. Not everybody can do a conventional loan and they can only do FHA or VA. Identify those so that the emails that they get are only going to be ones that they can purchase and not waste everybody's time on a property that they can't. Taxes, we are looking for a numeric field, and we are looking for annual taxes, not 6 months. We say you should not make adjustments. Whatever is written in the auditor or realist site, that is the value you should enter there. If they have a homestead exemption, say it here. And then if you want to do the math and say without the homestead, it is X number of dollars in your public remarks, you can do that. But this really should be what is documented in the auditor or realist site as current taxes being paid. They're always going to change when the property transfers anyway. So if you're doing math and you don't do it right, there could be some liability there. So please just make sure that you enter what is posted in the public auditor site. No, Virginia, I would not. This is what is written in the auditor site. So you can do the math and type it in your broker remarks, which is up here. We'll get to that. But no, this should actually be what is posted in the public records as current taxes being paid today. Very quickly, I kind of breezed over it. You enter, the parcel number gets entered. Sometimes you are selling multiple parcels on one listing agreement. And if you are selling the house and the lot next to it together as a package, you enter the primary parcel here, and at the bottom, the second parcel is entered. And then that shows up nicely on the listing. So if your listing agreement has 2 parcels, any additional go down here, the primary parcel is up here at the top. All right, next tab, features. Keep in mind, I'm moving through these tabs. I've saved nothing yet. If my power went out, it would not have saved anything I entered. Listings can be entered under only one subtype. So it's either condo or single family. That is based on zoning that is identified by universal land use or state land use, and it can be found on public record or realist tax site. Cluster homes are the ones that give us the most trouble here. Builders will identify at the building department and register with the auditor how they are identifying this subtype here, the land use, and that's how they should be entered. So sometimes it looks like that's a condominium association for those clusters, but it's not. It is a single family, and that's how it should be entered. That is important because financing can vary based on subtype. Certain financing is not available for condominiums. So do make sure you enter this properly. I don't care if the other 10 listings in that neighborhood were entered wrong. Don't fall off that cliff. Enter it correctly. Again, some of this information was automatically populated. Year built detail is just a weird field, but it's asking, is it the actual year built? Was it a new construction, which means it's been completed but not yet lived in? Is it to be built where permits were taken but it hasn't been started? Is it under construction, so they're not done with it, but it's been started? Not verifiable is you were given a year but you can't prove that it came from anywhere. And unknown is just you have no idea. It's not in the tax record. It's very, very old and you can't identify it. If you've got one that's to be built or under construction, you are to enter when you estimate that being completed. So now certainly you would use 2021 and then you could use either one of those. Ooh, square footage, a field I hate to talk about, but for you today I will. So square footage is optional. You do not have to put it in. It is not a required field. We look to see what is on the auditor site or realist. That's really your safest bet. You can choose something else. You can say the owner told me or an appraiser told me. But Basically, we are looking for above grade finished square feet. Above grade is identified by American National Standards Institute, which is what we call ANSI. They identify it as property, structure that is above grade or above ground. Then they state if any portion of that is below grade or below ground, that is not considered above grade. So things like walkout basements, basements with egress, raised ranches, if they have any portion of that level underground, then that is considered below grade. Appraisers have told us that they improve on the appraisal. They'll improve the property if that below grade square footage is finished the same as the rest of the structure, the above grade square footage. They will improve for that, but they don't count it in their square footage calculation, and neither should you. It is pretty black and white that if it's below ground, it's considered below grade. And again, we're looking for finished space only. So the utility room doesn't count. It's only the finished portion of that basement. I would recommend, if there's a question, use what's in your auditor site. That is the safest bet. If you enter data incorrectly, there is liability there and you can get sued. I had a story just recently that the agent was, way long ago, they were sued when she first started back in early 2000 because of the square footage and the way it was entered. If you're really not sure, don't enter it. It doesn't matter. It's not required. People like to see it. They can go to public record anyway and see it. So if you're putting something other than what's in the auditor site, that can come up in question. All right, these fields, the rest of these, let me stop there. Any questions on square footage? Optional, what's in the auditor site, choose your source appropriately. Notice it's not you. So should be owner, appraiser, auditor, or realist. Okay. Rest of these fields, fairly self-explanatory. When you see checkboxes, you check all that apply. I think in style, you have a max of 3. I've never seen a colonial ranch style house, so don't pick that. That's just weird. But if it's for example, a cluster home that's a Cape Cod, I would check those. Because some are gonna search for cluster home, some are gonna search for Cape Cod, and in both of those searches, your listing will come up. We typically say don't use the wording 55 or older community. However, if your community's bylaws state that, so if that neighborhood's bylaws state that it's a 55 and older community, we do let you check that here, and that's where you would search for it. But that is only if it's written. Don't just drive through the neighborhood and go, oh yeah, that looks like a 55 and older community. You might insult some people and then you might be wrong. All right, rooms is got a lot of information these days. This is auto-populated from Realist. When it talks about baths and full and half baths and laundry, you're gonna tell us how many there are, and then you're gonna tell us what floors they're on. Lower, main, upper. So basement, first floor, upper floor. Please make sure that you fill these in, they're required. Laundry, really that's basically hookups, laundry hookups. So if there's 2 hookups and one's in the basement and one's on the upper floor, fill in those fields. And if it doesn't have any, you have to put the 0. We added this laundry count and this bedrooms on main recently. Bedrooms on main are how many bedrooms are on the first floor. That is intended to make it finding those first floor bedrooms much easier than having to try to search through the detailed room info, which isn't required. So how many bedrooms are on that first floor? Can be a master, could be all of the bedrooms in a ranch. It could be just the additional bedrooms in a bungalow, but tell us how many are on the first floor. Then you have the option to fill in things like, my house has a living room. And if you tell us what room they have, you do have to tell us what floor it's on, but that's the only requirement. So none of this is required. But once you've entered it, you have to tell us what level. Room dimensions, use caution. Rounding can be tricky there. Room sizes, again, I've heard the horror stories where somebody said the room was this big because they rounded up, and then the couch or the bedroom or the rug didn't fit. And now there's litigation and it gets ugly. So just, we don't allow decimals. So you really should round maybe down, or note that it's close to 12 feet or whatever, if it's not quite 12 feet. And that would be done in remarks. All right. And then we also ask you what flooring, and that's optional. All right. And then if you want more here, you click more, and then you pick the next floor, the next room that it has, and you click more. So you can keep going. HOA and remarks has homeowners associations and maintenance fees available to enter. Homeowners association is typically fees that are charged by a neighborhood, and it's I've seen normally things like the common grounds, the pool, the basketball courts, the tennis courts, and it's covering maybe the gated entrance and stuff like that. So HOA, you're going to tell us yes or no. Who do you pay? How much? And how often? And then what does that include? Oh, bedrooms. Okay, sorry. Let's go back to that. That's a good question. I'm going to pop back. Somebody asked, Kelsey asked, what are the bedroom rules? I'm going to always tell you, use what's in your auditor site. MLS says bedrooms in the basement are not to be counted, including those with egress. Those should not be counted. It's only bedrooms in the above grade square footage that should be counted. And I would venture to guess that your auditor does the same. So bedrooms in the basement, not allowed to be counted, only bedrooms. And we don't talk about closets. Again, I will say, what does the auditor call it? If the auditor says it's 3 bedrooms, but you walk there and went, well, that looks like a bedroom. It just doesn't have a closet or a window or its own opening or its own doorway. We don't get into that. You might want to call an appraiser. You might want to call your auditor to see what they constitute as a bedroom. The Board of Governors years ago did say that bathrooms in the basement are allowed to be counted. So bathrooms in the basement can be counted because we make you tell us what floor are they on. So there's no surprises there. However, bathrooms, the ones I've seen in the basement, they can be a little sketchy. They might be just a toilet in the middle of the room, which is weird. So you might not want to count that as a full bath or a half bath. A hose coming through a window over a drain, maybe not a shower. If you're going to walk down there and go, whoa, that's the bathroom, everyone else is too. So just be thoughtful on those. A walkout basement is considered underground. And if it's not finished, it shouldn't even be counted as square footage. So walkout basements, that's below grade square footage. Use what's in your auditor. I'm promising you that if you look at your auditor, it's going to count that as below grade. If it doesn't, use what's in your auditor. That's your backup or realist. But again, we're looking for finished. If you go to, let me just show you something real quick. I'm going to open a new session. If you right click on any of these menus, you can open a link in a new tab and you're at a new session. We give you right here. Right here. Square footage standards. That's a document with a handful of pages that you can read through and see what those are. And those are the guidelines that we use. Yeah, of course, there's going to be violations. People want to do what they think is best. But I'll tell you, if you sell a house that they call 3,000 square feet today, because you counted that basement, and in 10 years, that owner goes to sell it, and they go, well, sorry, sir, that's only 2,000 square feet. You're like, wait a second, we just got we just lost a whole bunch of money. We bought it at 3,000 square feet. That gets very ugly. I mean, I think that can cause a lot of problems. And Tim, yes, the auditor and realist should have the same information. They do talk to each other, although there can be some errors. So I'm not going to promise you that it's always correct. The auditor can be wrong. So the auditor does feed realist. So that data should be the same. Okay, so HOA properties in a neighborhood, you're paying that. Typically that's once a year, right? That's an annual HOA fee. Common grounds. Maintenance fees are typically with condominiums and cluster homes, and they take care of things like, in general, not always, but in general, things like snow removal, driveways, things like that, trash, water, property management. So if your property has a maintenance fee, say yes. If your property has an HOA, say yes. If it has both, they should both say yes. But you should not put the one fee in both of these, because then it looks like it's double. If information is wrong in realist, can you be sued? That I would ask a lawyer that. I mean, that's where you pulled it, and you have the proof that it was in there. But if you know it's wrong in realist, let us know that. I would talk to a lawyer though, or your broker to talk about that. My guess is you can be sued for anything. Whether it holds up, I don't know. All right, so maintenance fees, HOAs, people search for this all the time. They want maintenance-free living, and they're gonna look for maintenance fee. Yes, don't put that maintenance fee in HOA. That gets very confusing. So make sure you enter those correctly. Then we have public remarks and broker remarks. Public remarks, basically used to describe the property, not to tell me about showings and things like that. And it should not be discriminatory. It should not use words like close to the church or great for single people or things like that. It should not say wonderful first-time home buyer, wonderful family neighborhood. Those are things that can be construed as discriminatory. In Matrix, we have under links today, FHA guidelines. I would recommend you pull those up and adhere to what they say can or cannot be used. They do have columns that say use caution, and just use caution or don't use them. But public remarks, go to the public facing websites like realtor.com, Zillow, your broker site, emailed to customers. So it should be describing the property. We don't want to see contact information or email address, phone numbers, commissions, showing instructions. None of that goes in public. That is not for them to see. Broker remarks is used to describe things that other agents should know about. It could include some showing instructions, bonuses, things like that. So use caution here. I would stay away from brand names in public remarks. That can be a little touchy. So just some generic descriptions of the property. Directions, please do not state use GPS. We will make you take that out. We like you to put in fairly detailed instructions, because not everybody is from this part of town, and they might not even know how to get to that main road. So use highways, use north, south, east, west, give good directions there. Lockbox. So now a lot of people are starting to use is close to excellent schools and shopping problematic? Okay, so excellent is just your opinion of that school, so I wouldn't choose that. Because if you say excellent on this one, but you don't say excellent schools on all your other listings, now you're discriminating against those other markets, is what I've been told. So I would steer clear of using adjectives. If you say blue ribbon school, and that's a fact that the school got a blue ribbon award, then that's okay. But when you're just kind of using your own opinions there, that can be problematic. Close to schools and shop, I would say no, but stay away from like houses of worship and things like that, because that can be problematic. I would stay away also from within walking distance, because that can be discriminatory towards people with disabilities. I know that sounds crazy, but that's a very big issue. So, you know, I actually had an agent in my class who had a son in a wheelchair, and you know, she made a very subtle remark, and it wasn't being accusatory or anything, but said she felt that that was offensive. You know, in today's world, we have to be very careful. So don't say, you know, if you think, would that be an issue? It probably is. So don't use it. All right. So lock boxes. Today, we do give everyone the ability every agent and appraiser in our MLS, the access to an e-key, right? So if you don't know that, that's a news alert. You can all get your e-key by going to Yes MLS, coming to this super link here, and sign up for your e-key, and you will download it on your phone. We will send you authorization. Many people are starting to use the Supra iBoxes on their listings. So you're going to come across those. Go get your e-key. And if you have a listing where you're putting an iBox, a Supra iBox on it, then come in here and say, yes, it has an electronic lockbox, and put your serial number so you can go find that lockbox later. If you had a bunch of listings and you want to know what listing has serial number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you will be able to find it. So that's really the purpose of that. It's not required, but it can be helpful. And we get a lot of phone calls on people saying they need their key because they're going to a showing that has an electronic lockbox on it. So you're going to see more and more of those. All right. Ignore Matrix test listing I'm in is a test account. All right. So we filled in some data. We want to save this and get back to it later because we have to go on a showing. I submit listing. It's going to tell me, it's going to give me this warning. Nobody ever reads this. Basically what it says is, if you're wanting to save this as incoming, hit submit again. That's important. That's that second submit I told you about. Or if you want to make this go live, come back and continue editing, change it to active, and fill in all the required fields. And then it's just going to give you some warnings. Hey, you left your annual taxes blank, or you didn't enter a price. It's outside of our range. And so these are just soft warnings. Submit listing now saved everything I just did. And it gave me a listing number. And if I go to that listing number, I can quickly see what I filled in and what's left and what it's going to look like. And notice it says incoming. All right, so that is adding that listing. How do you get back into it? Well, let's do this first. Before you make your listing live, I think it's a great idea to add pictures, any supplements you want to include, your virtual tour. So go ahead and you can do that before you make it live. So maybe you filled in everything, but now you want to go in and add pictures and supplements and such. So to pull up that incoming listing, we go back up to the top and choose input. We select you don't do this, support staff, if there's any support staff on the call, you would have to pick the agent, and then agents, you're just going to see select a listing here. You're not going to see a whole bunch of agents' names. You would just have this one drop down. So there's my incoming listing. And now I can go back into it. And what do I want to do? I can add the rest of the fields. I can go in and add tours, fix the map, delete it because I don't really want this incoming listing, add pictures, supplements, and go to showing time and get the instructions set up. So I want to add photos. Your job is to go take photos and know where you save them. Then you come in and you say browse, or if it's a listing that you're copying and you're getting the old photos, you want the photos from the last listing that you had, it's your listing, you could copy. It has to be free of any photos in order to copy. If you've already added a photo, that's not available. Or it's a new listing, you want to click browse and go find those pictures. And I have a folder here. And just a couple of little quick tips. You can click on a listing. If you hold control, you can click any other photo. Sorry, I said listing. Click on a picture, hold control on your keyboard, and then click other photos. You can hit the first picture, hold the Shift key, and click the last one. It gets the range of them. So Control was random pictures. Shift is the first, last, and everything in between. And Control A will grab all of them. Control A is a select all. We tell you 1024 by 768 pixels as your photo size. We find that between 2 and 4 megabytes is a good size. If it's any bigger than that, it's not going to upload. So 1024 by 768 is like an 8 by 10 photo. We recommend landscape because it fills the whole box. See how mine is filling the whole box here? Portrait pictures only, the center is the photo and the sides are white. Those look a little weird, but I get it. Sometimes there's layouts that you can't take otherwise. So if you ever see these red dashed lines, it's not the 1024 by 768. And sometimes they show up real little in the middle of the screen because they're so little. The resolution's so small. So you'll need to really do some trial and error here. You don't want to go crazy with cropping because it takes a picture and it uploads it into the system and makes it fit in the box. If you crop it to something other than 1024 by 768 or in proportion to that, it can't make it fit the box, so it's got to shrink it. I have seen people upload those collages, so yes, they'll be fairly small. I mean, not real. The thumbnail will be small. When you click on it, it gets pretty big. So yeah, I mean, as long as it's 1024 by 768 and doesn't violate any rules, I have seen those collages uploaded. I think a very underutilized piece of the photo section is adding remarks under that picture. So here you're looking at the pictures. You've got this little icon here that if you click on it, it lets you type in words. So I want to enter the description. Now I can type anything I want. And I notice red, underline, spell check. I say done. I say save. I still haven't saved it. I need to hit certify and save in order for that to be kept. But that is something that people don't use. They don't add the text under there. It's very nice. When it gets emailed to somebody, they see those words. The primary slot needs to be the front of the house. So I have to move number 5 over. Don't click on the picture. It doesn't move. It does nothing. Click on the word slot number. That lets you drag it and drop it. And then you can change the order of any of these. Do you see how that shifts just a little bit? That's where it's going to get dropped. So when you're moving these to the first position, you want to see that slight shift before you drop it. Okay. And then to save these, you click certify and save, and it stores those. I always think that's a great idea to do it before you make the listing active. And now as an agent, if you have listing input and can upload a listing, add your photos, because once it hits the system as active, it's going places. It goes to auto emails. It goes to public facing websites. And if you don't have pictures, I think people tend to skip over those. Other things you can add, virtual tours. So we will, through Property Panorama, if you have more than 3 pictures, take those and turn it into a virtual tour that really is just a slideshow of the photos. It looks very nice. It's free, and you could be done. Or you can go take your own or have your own virtual tour taken, and then you would manage virtual tours, copy the link and paste it in here for that tour. It must be unbranded. That means you cannot have your name, your company information, an email link, a sign. You can't say in your virtual tour, hey, it's Laura with Yes MLS. Call me if you want to see this house. All of those are not allowed. We check them all. And if you find one, let us know, because they might have added it and we missed it. But your tour that you're adding must be unbranded. It can't go to your personal website. It can't go to your YouTube account that's got laurarealtor@gmail.com. Virtual, but virtual tour can be recorded video tour if unbranded. Like if you're going through a house with your camera, your video camera, yes, you can walk through your house with your video camera. Don't say your name. Don't wear clicky shoes on wood floors. And you can upload that to a site. So I always say, you know, make it an unbranded, maybe YouTube account. It's not Laura Graber, because you know I'm an agent. I'm not an agent, but you know, can't be Jane Agent. But if it's Ohio Tours or virtual tours for MLS, I mean, make up an email that you can use for your YouTube account. It's just simply making a Gmail account. Then yeah, you can do that as long as it's not branded and it doesn't link back to you as your agent email address sending you leads. That's what we're looking for. If you take and pay for, not take, but if you pay for one of those Matterport tours, right? The Matterport 3D tour that's like the dollhouse and you're walking through that home, or any other tour like that gives you the 3D effect, that would go in this virtual 3D tour. And these get, they get added in a different column. So, you know, use 3D for those specifically that are 3D, and everything else goes in virtual tour 1. Property panorama is the second one. Okay. Stay away from branding there. If you pay somebody to do it, like, the name is escaping me. Circle Pix, that's a virtual tour company. They will send you a branded and unbranded version. Make sure to use the unbranded one in our system. And then finally, supplements. If you have lead-based paint disclosures, property disclosures, bank documents, community bylaws, and you want to, or anything, how to submit your offer, and you want it written instructions included in the listing that only other agents will see, you can add them here. You can give it a name. So you could say disclosures. You'll browse, I don't have one, but you would browse and go find it. And those have to be PDFs, less than 10 megabytes, which that's pretty big. So you would browse and go find it, and then you would tell us what it is. So you could say it's other because it's lead-based and property disclosures, and you say upload, and it would upload that. And then if you have another one, you go through the same process. You can change the order. So name them so that people understand what they are. And you can upload as many as you need to. Again, under 10 megabytes for those. All right, let's say we've done everything. We put the pictures in, we added the attachments, we are ready to make this listing active. I can go to residential listing input. So again, start an input tab, pull that listing up. Now I want to go to residential listing input, change it to active. I think I filled in all the fields. I'm going to see. I'm going to click submit listing. I did not. You know that because you have red exclamation points on all the tabs where you missed a required field. You could come down here to say, what are the errors? Or simply click through these tabs and scroll down. You're going to find they've now made them red triangles. Red triangles and identifying the fields that you missed. You may also see yellow triangles. I don't have any right now, but if you were to see a yellow triangle, that just indicates that there may be a problem with that field. You don't have to fix it. You can choose submit, but they're just bringing attention that there could possibly be an issue, like if you put in $10 million. Oh, and it's not going to do it now. 100 million. Let's see if it gives me that error. See that little, it's very faint. That yellow triangle indicates that I'm outside our normal price range of, I think it's 3,000 to maybe 10 million. So I might have put too many zeros in there. That I can still save it. That's just a soft warning, but these will not let you save without fixing them. So look through and fill in everything that's required. And once you do that, you would be able to save it. If you get interrupted and say, okay, I've entered some of the red exclamation points, now I need to go save it back as incoming. You need to come back here, save it as incoming, submit, and submit a second time. That's key, so that it stores the changes that you just made. Some things that you should know, but I can't show you here. Let me get back to my account. So in the input tab, if you want to do things like add an open house, if you want to add change a status, you can come into your listing. Oh, well, I did that too fast. Sometimes you just know the listing number. You could type that here. You don't have to use this drop down that has a whole bunch. You could just type in the listing number here and edit it. So a couple things I want to show you. Adding an open house. Do that early and often. If you're having open houses, enter that early, the earlier the better, because it goes out to places like Realtor.com, Zillow, and it indicates to viewers that that house is having an upcoming open house. We have, you can enter many open houses here. I hope you don't have to ever use the max, but what happens is we want you to use a new entry. So if you're having an open house this weekend, pick from the, start as a new open house at the bottom, fill in the appropriate information, and save that. Save it. Do not go back and go, oh, well, this is the exact same thing. It's just a different date, because look at this field, this active field. If that doesn't get updated, if you go back and change an old open house and forget to change this to yes, it's essentially like you never even opened it. It is very important to always add a new one. And a couple things, it's a nice log to say for you that is stored for you, to see how many open houses you've had. The comments are only for agents. That does not go to public facing sites. So the comments in here are only within the MLS when you search open houses. We did also add, because of COVID, something called live stream open houses. And those are where you are going to be you are going to be at the open house live, but you're not having people come in. You're just going to walk through that open house and show the home, and people can join on your Zoom or Facebook Live or whatever. So that is a live stream open house that also gets fed to those sites, and you will include the link for those people to see that live streaming open house. So with Zoom, it's fairly easy, I think, to set that up in advance. And then you can make that available. I don't know how big of a hit that was in our market. I know people are now having open houses again, but I think that's a pretty cool feature if you don't want to, in light of things are changing pretty quickly right now. So, all right. So remember to submit those. Don't enter or don't change an old one. Always enter a new one. And then your screen will not look like this. I'm staff, so I get all of these statuses, but you would have, things like change to active, change to under contract, no showings or allow showings, change to temporarily off the market. So you won't get to see things that you cannot do. But for example, you have a listing, active listing, got an offer written on it, you want to change it to under contract, allow showings. That status and under contract, no showings are really up to your seller to identify and say, yep, I don't want any more showings. Please take it to a status that that will prevent showings. Or yeah, you know what, I'm not sure of this deal. Let's continue to have showings. Please, Mr. Realtor, Mrs. Realtor, I'm willing to have more showings. So that's really not up to you. That's up to your seller, what they want to do. You should have that conversation with them. So if they say allow showings, then you're going to move it to under contract, allow showings. What's the purchase agreement contract date? When did all parties sign? That goes here. And what is it really basically contingent on? So you tell us what it's contingent on, and then you submit that. Every listing must go into under contract no showings before you can mark it sold. So if you have something in under contract allow, at some point your seller might go, okay, we're good. All of the things that had to happen happened. We don't want any more showings. We know it's going to go through. Or you wait up until the very last minute, and when it transfers, it still needs to go into under contract no showings before you mark it closed. This contract date is the date that is on the contract. So we've always said you have 48 hours, you have 2 business days to get that status change made. This freaks a lot of people out. They're like, well, my contract was back in November. I'm way beyond 2 business days. Right. But you moved it into under contract allow showings within 2 days. You're still good. We see that. We see that in the history and go, okay, yep, you did it in time the first time. Now you're just moving it into no showings because that's what your seller wanted. Use the date that's on your contract that was maybe back in November if you went to allow showings first. I hope that makes sense to everyone. If you're going from active to under contract no showings immediately, then again, that's the contract date on your purchase agreement. When you mark a listing closed or sold, we call it, change it to sold or leased. A lot of fields to fill in here. What's the price? Was it a sale? Was it a lease? Was it a trade? How was it financed? That's important. When did it transfer? Did the seller pay any closing costs? If you click that help button, it gives you some good examples of what closing costs are. It's not to repair the garage or reseed the lawn or fix the driveway. Those are not closing costs. Closing costs are things like they paid the points, they paid for the inspection, they paid the appraisal fee, things like that. You enter the selling agent's license number. That should be on documentation you received during the purchase agreement. So you type in the number there and hit refresh. If you click that help button, it is helpful. It tells you if it's a non-member, enter 4 9s. So maybe it was an agent out of a different MLS and not a member of ours. We call that a non-member. So it's somebody from maybe the Firelands or Ashland MLS or Columbus. They're not our member, but you still have to mark it. It's not you. It's not you. It's a non-member. So you would enter 9999 and hit refresh. And it pulls in the non-member. And if, okay, we tell you here in red, and it's in red to draw attention to you, to have it, you read it. Is that selling agent on a team? And we have so many issues with this. Okay, so you worked with me. You worked with me the whole time, but I work on the MLS, Yes MLS team. And my team lead always gets marked as the selling agent, and I am the co-selling agent. It's always a good idea, as you, the listing agent, are marking this closed, to check with that buyer's agent and say, are you on a team, and should you be marked selling or co-selling agent? It's a quick phone call or text. It really should be on the documentation, so read through that as well. But it is important to enter that correctly, because if you enter me and then I have to call you and go, no, it's not me, it's my team lead, now you have to send us paperwork, and that becomes a real pain in the neck. So double check up front. That's why we put that there. Just check to see if they're on a team. If you are on a team, you are a person, an agent that's on a team, when you represent the buyer, it's not a bad idea to put in writing on a piece of paper and big bold print. When closing this listing, use this agent as the selling agent and my agent as the co-selling agent. Make sure that is clear, big, bold text on its standalone page. Doesn't have to be little tiny text. People don't read it, but that will help facilitate getting that data entered correctly. Some things you should know about some other statuses. So we've talked about these. Withdrawn gives you two options, with or without release. With release is where you are letting that person go. With release, you are released from the listing agreement. They're released from the listing agreement. They can move on and sell it on their own, still live in it and do nothing, list with another agent. You need a mutual release with that. And the mutual release needs to be signed by your broker because essentially they are the responsible party. That seller signed a legal document to get into that contract. They need to sign a legal document to get out of that contract. Your brokerage should have that mutual release. We do not. So withdrawn with release requires signed, not emailed, signed paperwork by many parties. Withdrawn no release says that you're just taking this out of an active status in the MLS. They're still under contract with you, but you're no longer promoting it in the MLS. And if it should sell, you're not going to mark it closed because you withdrew it from the MLS. So you're still under contract. That seller is still obligated to you because you have a signed listing agreement. It's just no longer being promoted in the MLS. If it sells, again, you don't mark it closed. It's not a comp only. It's still listed. It's just not being promoted in the MLS. We talked about temp off market, but here's the status changed to temporarily off the market. We also call it TOMK. You'll give us the date. So your seller gave you paperwork. That could be an email. Please take my listing at 123 Main Street, temporarily off the market on Wednesday, December 9th, and please reactivate it on January 2nd, 2021. So I have all the right paperwork. I put it in here and I have to type in my remarks here, BOM 1/2/2021, and that would be acceptable and allow you to save it. It checks to make sure it's written just like this. You might need 2 digits for the dates too. So just type it that way just to be safe. Temp off market can always change. That back on market date can change. So if it needs to be pushed out again, that's fine. Needs to be reactivated earlier, that's fine too. Just get it in writing. Things you need to be aware of. Price changes and extensions can be made on a verbal. They need to be backed up in writing within 10 days. And it can be an email for those two things. And I'm going to point out under help, your name and help. If you type status up here, we give you a nice little sheet called status definitions. This is a great little handout. Talks about the different statuses. And what you need and what it means and things like that. So, so when a listing is ready to expire, I just said you can get an extension on a verbal, has to be backed up in writing within 10 days. NAR and OAR, or OR now, says that you must get that extension before the listing expires. You cannot do it after the fact. Okay, so if your listing is going to expire on next Friday, you can call that seller and say, hey, your listing is going to expire soon. Let's not have any lapse in your listing online. Do you want to extend it? And they say, yes, that's fine. Go in and do it. You have 2 days to do it from their approval, not 2 days from the expiration date, right? So if they gave you permission today to extend it, you have 2 days from today to push that date out. And if you did it with the verbal, get it backed up in writing within 10 days. You could send an email and say, dear Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you agreed on December 9th to extend your listing at 123 Main Street through March 31st, 2021. Please confirm back to me that we had that conversation. They can both confirm back to you, and that's your in writing. Don't just say, hey, Joe, you decided to extend your listing. Let me know that you approve that. That's not good enough. The names of the parties, the listing address, the details of the change for price changes and extensions. If that listing should expire next Friday and you called them on Saturday and said, your listing expired, do you want to extend it? You can't do that. You'll need to get a whole new listing agreement. So pay attention to your expiration dates and get those listings ahead of time. You have 2 days from when they expire. I'm sorry, 2 days from when you get that permission in order to get that changed in the system. Withdrawn, again, that needs to be in writing. Listings that are under contract, either allow or no showings, once they reach their expiration date, will move to a status called under contract expired. Don't panic there. If you didn't get the extension, that's fine. You can still mark that listing sold because it will stay in under contract expired for up to 6 months, giving you the opportunity to change it within the 14 days of settlement date. No, the only people that see expiration dates are you on your own listings, not anybody, no other agents in your office or outside of your office. And your broker and support staff will also see it, but no, that is not a publicly viewable field. So when that listing moves to under contract expired and it transfers now, let's say it expired today in the under contract status, and now it transfers next, next Monday, you can go in and mark that sold. If it does not transfer and it falls apart, the only thing you can do is mark that listing expired. So we say, when you're getting paperwork signed with your purchase agreement, especially if your expiration date is soon, extend that listing through the life of the purchase agreement so that you won't have any issues should that deal have some hiccups in it. Good business rule. Extend listings through the life of the listing agreement. We don't require it. It's just good to do it so that you don't run into trouble in the end. Okay. Once your listing, again, is closed, you cannot remove any photos or withdrawn or expired for that matter. So please make sure to pay attention to that and have those conversations ahead of time. Everything I covered, again, is in under the help menu. So it's your name and help. And then it's under training manual. So that's the listing input guide, listing input book. This is being recorded. So that will be under webinars. And you can watch it over and over, especially if you can't sleep at night. And if you have any questions, our phone number is right there. The help desk is extension 480. The quality assurance, which actually looks at the listings, sends you the audits, sends the errors, their extension 485. And if you have a question on specific rules, that's the fastest way to get that question answered is to go to 485 to ask those specific weird situations. All right. I just want to show you very quickly, if you have a listing that is in that incoming status, so I'll come back to this. Let me come back here. So this was the listing I started today, and that was just a dummy listing and I want to get rid of it. I go in to pull it up as if I'm going to make it active or add something. I've got an option here that says delete incoming status. I can click on that and get rid of this dummy listing by saying yes and submit. And now that's gone. So I'm going to hand in the registration so right now, if you did not yet do it, please enter your name and license number in the chat box. So I know you attended to get listing input permissions added, and then also double check with your broker or manager and make sure that they have sent over paperwork giving you those permissions. And we'll turn this into membership. She will go ahead and add that if both of those pieces are in place. If you don't have listing input, it might be today, it might be tomorrow. I think she might be leaving today. Then check with your broker, because most likely they did not they have not sent the paperwork. Assistance, typically, Christina, yes, you get that when they add you, if you have like a 999 number. Is it okay or possible to require that? You know what, Tom, about your making them view the tour before they come? I've seen people state that on their listing. I don't know that we can enforce that. That might be a question for your broker or a board, but we can't enforce that they view that or even see that they did before they actually come and make that appointment and go to the house. So you need to enter, I'm sorry, for your broker, they need to send over permission. And that is a form under links. It's down here and it's called listing input authorization. How do you know if you already had it? We can check. If you give our help desk a call, we can look that up to see, or if you don't get the input within the next couple of days, it means they didn't do it. So I will stick around for a few minutes if you have any other questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending. I will think, and for the kind feedback, I will give that to my manager. I know we do some like listing input tips and things like that, but this is the class that actually gives you the training requirement. It fulfills that training requirement. So I think we could do more of these, and I think they'd be helpful because it's the full class. So, oh, Bob, you're so funny. You guys all have great Christmases or whatever holiday you celebrate. Enjoy. Stay safe out there from this crazy COVID. And hopefully we'll get to see your faces next year when we're all vaccinated and can move forward with life. As always, call the help desk if you have any questions on things. And again, if you need us to check, we can always see if your broker has sent over that or manager has sent that permission. And keep in mind that sometimes that permission does not allow you to change statuses. So let's see. On that listing input authorization, sometimes they only give you limited access, which says you can enter a listing, but you can't change statuses. So just an FYI there. All right, I'll hang out a little bit longer. If you have questions, shoot them over there in chat and I'm happy to answer them.